Chapter 3. Some derivative notions. The primordial created fact is the unconditioned conceptual valuation of the entire multiplicity of eternal objects. This is the primordial nature of God. By reason of this complete valuation, the objectification of God in each derivative actual entity results in a graduation of the relevance of eternal objects to the concrescent phases of that derivate occasion. There will be additional ground of relevance for select eternal objects by reason of their ingression into derivate actual entities belonging to the actual world of the concrescent occasion in question. But whether or no this be the case, there is always the definite relevance derived from God. Apart from God, eternal objects unrealized in the actual world would be relatively non-existent for the concrescence in question. For effective relevance requires agency of comparison. Agency belongs exclusively to actual occasions. This divine ordering is itself matter of fact, thereby conditioning creativity. Thus possibility, which transcends realized temporal matter of fact, has a real relevance to the creative advance. God is the primordial creature, but the description of his nature is not exhausted by this conceptual side of it. His consequent nature results from his physical prehensions of the derivative actual entities. Creativity is another rendering of the Aristotelian matter and of the modern neutral stuff. But it is divested of the notion of passive receptivity, either of form or of external relations. It is the pure notion of the activity conditioned by the objective immortality of the actual world, a world which is never the same twice, though always with the stable element of divine ordering. Creativity is without a character of its own in exactly the same sense in which the Aristotelian matter is without a character of its own. It is that ultimate notion of the highest generality at the base of actuality. It cannot be characterized because all characters are more special than itself, but creativity is always found under conditions and described as conditioned. The non-temporal act of all-inclusive, unfettered valuation is at once a creature of creativity and a condition for creativity. It shares this double character with all creatures by reason of its character as a creature, always in concrescence and never in the past. It receives a reaction from the world. This reaction is its consequent nature. It is here termed God, because the contemplation of our natures as enjoying real feelings derived from the timeless source of all order acquires that subjective form of refreshment and companionship at which religions aim. This function of creatures, that they constitute the shifting character of creativity, is here termed the objective immortality of actual entities. Thus God has objective immortality in respect to his primordial nature and his consequent nature. The objective immortality of his consequent nature is considered later. Part 5. We are now concerned with his primordial nature. God's immanence in the world in respect to his primordial nature is an urge towards the future based upon an appetite in the present. Appetition is at once the conceptual valuation of an immediate physical feeling combined with the urge towards realization of the datum conceptually prehended. For example, thirst is an immediate physical feeling integrated with the conceptual prehension of its quenching. Appetition is immediate matter of fact, including in itself a principle of unrest, involving realization of what is not and may be. The immediate occasion thereby conditions creativity so as to procure, in the future, physical realization of its mental pole, according to the various valuations inherent in its various conceptual prehensions. All physical experience is accompanied by an appetite for or against its continuance. Is the appetition of self-preservation, but the origination of the novel conceptual prehension has, more especially, to be accounted for. Thirst is an appetite towards a difference, towards something relevant, something largely identical, but something with a definite novelty. This is an example at a low level which shows the germ of a free imagination. In what sense can unrealized abstract form be relevant? What is its basis of relevance? Relevance must express some real fact of togetherness among forms. The ontological principle can be expressed as all real togetherness is togetherness in the formal constitution of an actuality. So if there be a relevance of what in the temporal world is unrealized, the relevance must express a fact of togetherness in the formal constitution of a non-temporal actuality. But by the principle of relativity, there can only be one non-derivative actuality unbounded by its prehensions of an actual world. Such a primordial superject of creativity achieves, in its unity of satisfaction, the complete conceptual valuation of all eternal objects. This is the ultimate basic adjustment of the togetherness of eternal objects on which creative order depends. It is the conceptual adjustment of all appetites in the form of aversions and adversions. It constitutes the meaning of relevance. Its status as an actual efficient fact is recognized by terming it the primordial nature of God. The word appetition illustrates a danger which lurks in technical terms. The same danger is also illustrated in the psychology derived from Freud. The mental poles of actualities contribute various grades of complex feelings to the actualities, including them as factors. The basic operations of mentality are conceptual prehensions. These are the only operations of pure mentality. All other mental operations are impure in the sense that they involve integrations of conceptual prehensions with the physical prehensions of the physical pole. Since impurity in prehension refers to the prehension arising out of the integration of pure physical prehensions with pure mental prehensions, it follows that an impure mental prehension is also an impure physical prehension conversely. Thus the term impure applied to a prehension has a perfectly definite meaning and does not require the terms mental or physical, except for the direction of attention in the discussion concerned. The technical term conceptual prehension is entirely neutral, devoid of all suggestiveness, but such terms present great difficulties to the understanding by reason of the fact that they suggest no particular exemplifications. Accordingly, we seek equivalent terms which have about them the suggestiveness of a familiar fact. We have chosen the term appetition, which suggests exemplifications in our own experience also in the lower terms of life, such as insects and vegetables. But even in human experience, appetition suggests a degrading notion of this basic activity in its more intense operations. We are closely concerned with what Bergson calls intuition. With some differences, however, Bergson's intuition is an impure operation. It is an integral feeling derived from the synthesis of the conceptual prehension with the physical prehension from which it has been derived according to the category of conceptual reproduction. Categorical obligation number 4. It seems that Bergson's term intuition has the same meaning as physical purpose in part 3 of these lectures. Also, Bergson's intuition seems to abstract from the subjective form of emotion and purpose. This subjective form is an essential element in the notion of conceptual prehension, as indeed in that of any prehension. It is an essential element in physical purpose if we consider these pure mental operations. In their most intense operations, we should choose the term vision. A conceptual prehension is a direct vision of some possibility of good or evil, of some possibility as to how actualities may be definite. There is no reference to particular actualities or to any particular actual world. The phrase of good or of evil has been added to include a reference to the subjective form. The mere word vision abstracts from this factor in a conceptual prehension. If we say that God's primordial nature is completeness of appetition, we give due weight to the subjective form at a cost. If we say that God's primordial nature is intuition, we suggest mentality, which is impure by reason of synthesis with physical prehension. If we say that God's primordial nature is vision, we suggest a maimed view of the subjective form, divesting it of yearning after concrete fact, no particular facts, but after some actuality. There is deficiency in God's primordial nature, which the term vision obscures. One advantage of the term vision is that it connects this doctrine of God more closely with philosophical tradition. Envisagement is perhaps a safer term than vision. To sum up, God's primordial nature is abstracted from his commerce with particulars, and is therefore devoid of those impure intellectual cogitations which involve propositions. It is God in abstraction alone with himself. As such, it is a mere factor in God, deficient in actuality. The notions of social order and of personal order cannot be omitted from this preliminary sketch. A society, in the sense in which that term is here used, is a nexus with social order and an enduring object or enduring creature. It's a society whose social order has taken the special form of personal order. A nexus enjoys social order where, 1, there is a common element of form illustrated in the definiteness of each of its included actual entities, and 2, this common element of form arises in each member of the nexus by reason of the conditions imposed upon it by its prehensions of some other members of the nexus, and 3, these prehensions impose that condition of reproduction by reason of their inclusion of positive feelings of that common form. Such a nexus is called a society, and the common form is the defining characteristic of the society. The notion of defining characteristic is allied to the Aristotelian notion of substantial form. The common element of form is simply a complex, eternal object exemplified in each member of the nexus, but the social order of the nexus is not the mere fact of this common form exhibited by all its members. The reproduction of the common form throughout the nexus is due to the genetic relations of the members of the nexus among each other, and to the additional fact that genetic relations include feelings of the common form. Thus, the defining characteristic is inherited throughout the nexus, each member deriving it from those other members of the nexus which are antecedent to its own concrescence. A nexus enjoys personal order when A, it is a society, and B, when the genetic relatedness of its members orders these members serially. By this serial ordering, arising from the genetic relatedness, it is meant that any member of the nexus, excluding the first and the last, if there be such, constitutes a cut in the nexus so that A, This member inherits from all members on one side of the cut and from no members on the other side of the cut. And B, if A and B are two members of the nexus and B inherits from A, then the side of B's cut inheriting from B forms part of the side of A's cut inheriting from A. And the side of A's cut from which A inherits forms part of the side of B's cut from which B inherits. Thus the nexus forms a single line of inheritance of its defining characteristic. Such a nexus is called an enduring object. It might have been termed a person in the legal sense of the term, but unfortunately person suggests the notion of consciousness, so that its use would lead to misunderstanding. The nexus sustains a character, and this is one of the meanings of the Latin word persona. But an enduring object, qua person, does more than sustain a character, for this substance arises out of the special genetic relations among the members of the nexus. An ordinary physical object which has temporal endurance is a society. In the ideally simple case, it has personal order and is an enduring object. A society may or may not be analyzable into many strands of enduring objects. This will be the case for most ordinary physical objects. These enduring objects and societies, analyzable into strands of enduring objects, are the permanent entities which enjoy adventures of change throughout time and space. For example, they form the subject matter of the science of dynamics. Actual entities perish, but do not change. They are what they are. A nexus which, one, enjoys social order, and two, is analyzable into strands of enduring objects, may be termed a corpuscular society. A society may be more or less corpuscular, according to the relative importance of the defining characteristics of the various enduring objects compared to that of the defining characteristic, the whole corpuscular nexus. There is a prevalent misconception that becoming involves the notion of a unique seriality for its advance into novelty. This is the classic notion of time, which philosophy took over from common sense. Mankind made an unfortunate generalization from its experience of enduring objects. Recently, physical science has abandoned this notion. Accordingly, we should now purge cosmology of a point of view which it ought never to have adopted as an ultimate metaphysical principle. In these lectures, the term creative advance is not to be construed in the sense of a uniquely serial advance. Finally, the extensive continuity of the physical universe has usually been construed to mean that there is a continuity of becoming. But if we admit that something becomes, it is easy, by employing Zeno's method, to prove that there can be no continuity of becoming. There is a becoming of continuity, but no continuity of becoming. The actual occasions are the creatures which become, and they constitute a continuously extensive world. In other words, extensiveness becomes, but becoming is not itself extensive. Thus, the ultimate metaphysical truth is atomism. The creatures are atomic. In the present cosmic epoch, there is a creation of continuity. Perhaps such creation is an ultimate metaphysical truth holding of all cosmic epochs. But this does not seem to be a necessary conclusion. The more likely opinion is that extensive continuity is a special condition arising from the society of creatures, which constitute our immediate epoch. But atomism does not exclude complexity and universal relativity. Each atom is a system of all things. The proper balance between atomism and continuity is of importance to physical science. For example, the doctrine here explained conciliates Newton's corpuscular theory of light, with the wave theory, for both a corpuscle and an advancing element of wave front are merely a permanent form, propagated from atomic creature to atomic creature. A corpuscle is in fact an enduring object. The notion of an enduring object is, however, capable of more or less completeness of realization. Thus, in different stages of its career, a wave of light may be more or less corpuscular. A train of such waves at all stages of its career involves social order, but in the earlier stages, this social order takes the more special form of loosely related strands of personal order. This dominant personal order gradually vanishes as the time advances. Its defining characteristics become less and less important as their various features peter out. The waves then become a nexus with important social order, but with no strands of personal order. Thus the train of waves starts as a corpuscular society and ends as a society which is not corpuscular. Finally, in the cosmological scheme here outlined, one implicit assumption of the philosophical tradition is repudiated. The assumption is that the basic elements of experience are to be described in terms of one or all of the three ingredients: consciousness, thought, sense perception. The last term is used in the sense of conscious perception in the mode of presentational immediacy. Also in practice, sense perception is narrowed down to visual perception. According to the philosophy of organism, these three components are unessential elements in experience, either physical or mental. Any instance of experience is dipolar, whether that instance be God or an actual occasion of the world. The origination of God is from the mental pole. The origination of an actual occasion is from the physical pole. But in either case, these elements, consciousness, thought, sense perception, belong to the derivative, impure phases of the concrescence, if in any effective sense they enter at all. This repudiation is the reason why, in relation to the topic under discussion, the status of presentational immediacy is a recurrent theme throughout the subsequent parts of these lectures.